Ida, hello. Really
Hello,
nice
it's so good to
to.
be here.
We are so proud to have you here with us. And the stage is yours. Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely. Um, and it's delightful to be joining you from here in Brooklyn. Uh, can you guys see my screen all right?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. I'm getting a little bit of feedback, which is slightly distracting, but I'll try and ignore it as best I can. Um, so I'm delighted to open the remote content portion of the day, calling in from Brooklyn. I'm here to talk to you about designing experiences that make us feel alive. And I would like to dedicate this talk to Annetta Black, who is a great inspiration for me and many people in her community. Annetta, even in death, you make me feel alive. So, as was said, I am founder and director of Uncommon Places Design. Um, I'll share a couple projects with you that predate that, but inform the work and hopefully provide you all with some lessons for how to create experiences that really matter to people. At Uncommon Places Design, we have three core values. The first one is to trust in emergence. Emergence is kind of a 50-cent English word that basically means that when you bring different elements together uh, in just the right configuration, more will happen than you can possibly anticipate. And so this is really about letting go of control, trusting the context, trusting your participants. We also really value responsive collaboration. That means both with clients as well as with participants and guests. So again, knowing that they bring a lot to the table and that while we may be experts in experience design, we are not experts in the experience that any one person is going to have. So allowing space for that constant collaboration throughout the whole design process and in the moment. And then also, we very much value vulnerability through integrity. Oftentimes, powerful experiences will put us in a vulnerable place. And the best way to support and allow for that vulnerability is by bringing the utmost of integrity to how we treat participants and everything that goes into the design. The first lesson or idea that I want to share with you around this is that normal constraints can create extraordinary outcomes. I'm going to share one project with you to um, drive home this example. This is probably the project that I am most famous for. It's called the Night Heron Speakeasy. It happened over 10 years ago here in New York. And we created a true speakeasy in that it was a completely illegal drinking establishment inside of a dry water tower in the middle of Manhattan. Most people in New York, if you've visited New York, you see these water towers all across the skyline. They're an important little piece of New York infrastructure, but very few people have been inside of them. And usually they're full of water. So even less people have been inside of a dry one. And we scouted and found a water tower that was well positioned and built a bar in it. Now, since this was completely illegal, we had no permission to be there. That created some real constraints around what we could do with the experience. We wanted to make sure that people could attend that were far removed from our own network, just because it's so inspiring and exciting to share those experiences beyond your immediate circles. And we also wanted to make sure that we wouldn't be detected at all, that we could kind of get away with this as long as was reasonable without any kind of authorities apprehending us or blowing up our spot. There were some other constraints that may not be totally obvious from looking at the press and reading this. If you look at the picture, especially the one on the upper right, um, you can see a lot of things there. People are sitting at tables. You can see that piano bench is actually the bar. There's a ladder going up to the platform for the band. Something that is not here is a restroom. And so that was also a constraint we dealt with. We had to make sure people could have the full experience without actually needing to go to the restroom very badly before they had to leave. And so these were all real constraints. And by just taking these constraints very seriously, we ended up designing some mechanisms in the gatherings that had unanticipated consequences in the best possible way. So since we wanted to both have the invitees be people as far removed from our own personal network as possible, but also keep the experience totally secret, we devised a gifting system. So you could only come to the Night Heron Speakeasy as a gift of someone who had already attended. So this way, the experience would get passed on to the right people, but everybody who's passing it on gets implicated in the task of keeping it a secret. And so this kind of struck the right balance of like spreading the experience while still keeping it covert. The interesting byproduct of this, also, I mean, if it's not totally obvious from the pictures, capacity was very low. The seatings were, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8. It's like, you know, between 8 to 10 people per seating. So, you know, very low capacity experience. This meant that if you're going to gift admission to somebody, we had very limited availability. And so what ended up happening with these kind of constraints in play is that people selected folks from their network that they either really cared about, felt like they owed something beautiful to, or like who were especially well suited for this experience, or who they really wanted to impress. The Night Heron ended up running for about 7 weeks. The reason we shut it down was in part the crew got very exhausted running this, and also because we ended up having the caliber of guests that made it clear we weren't going to be able to keep this secret anymore. But in the course of that, we would get to seatings where you would have an airplane mechanic sitting next to the head of a major international liquor empire. Really unusual and interesting mix. So this is an instance where, again, like normal, perhaps some of the constraints I described don't sound particularly normal, but they're practical, concrete constraints, result in phenomenal outcomes. Other things we did, we didn't allow people to bring their phones in, so there was no photography. Unexpected positive outcome of that is that all of the pictures that you can find of the Night Heron are beautiful because there's no amateur photography out there of it. And also this constraint of having to kind of come in and leave before there's a pressing need to use the bathroom also meant that the experience was short in a way that made it kind of increasingly fantastical and dreamlike. Because, you know, you were left with these like sensory impressions that were really quite dazzling. So that's the first kind of lesson that I want to share with you. The next one I want to share in terms of really helping your guests and participants feel alive is to let them have the ideas. This can feel very antithetical for people who take a lot of pride in their design and their craft, but let me share an important example again with you. So this project was a private commission. It was codenamed Smoke Machine, and we were doing a kind of exploration of New York Harbor as an important feature of New York City that could be appreciated both by locals as well as people coming from abroad that would seem equally interesting and foreign for both of those groups. At this particular location, you can see some of the installations. Many artists were involved. Again, this was a private commission, so the guest list was managed by the client. And this was like a really kind of fantastic gift that the client was creating for their extended network. And at no point did they want to be the center of attention. They didn't want to be even identified on the invitations, which I thought was very laudable and very interesting. This was kind of like a dream client for me in that sense. Yet at the same time, I knew that the guests would feel so enthusiastic and excited about being able to participate in this, that the wealth of enthusiasm and generosity that they would have in return for the clients who were enabling this experience would have to go somewhere. And so even though the clients really did not want to be the center of attention at any point, I knew that there would be kind of like problematic outcomes from that, that the gratitude and the enthusiasm would end up still moving towards them, probably in ways that they didn't appreciate. So better to channel it, to capture it. I had to sit down with them many times to encourage them to brainstorm about this. They really didn't want to engage with it at all. And so I was trying to think, what kind of ritual could we embed in this experience that would give everybody an opportunity to like acknowledge and be together and honor the vision and the work that the individuals putting this together were going to do. And every time I sat down to brainstorm with them about it, they squirmed, they were unhappy. And then there was one conversation where they had like a side discussion about some fun weekend plans that they had. And they have this habit of always going out in costume wigs. So like they go out clubbing or go out partying and they put on costume wigs and suddenly they could be like open and vibrant instead of standing in the corner and just kind of staring at their shoes. And I was like, that's it. Whatever we create, it has to have costume wigs. That's these like colorful wigs you see in the picture. And their initial reaction was utter horror. I've learned that in working with clients, if the idea comes from them and the idea of actually acting on it fills them with a little bit of dread, you've actually hit on something really good. What ended up happening over the course of designing this ritual is that they were able to stand in the middle of all the guests, everybody assembled all together, and individually wig every single guest, have that moment of connection in front of everybody to properly welcome them into this experience. Whereas before, they wanted nothing like that. But because I worked with an idea and a passion that was so unique and appropriate to them, they could stretch into it. And it ended up being such a beautiful ritual that I had no role to play whatever in actually running the experience. They ended up embracing it so fully. So let them have the ideas. And then, I know that Novi focuses on workplace learning culture. I've done a bunch of work in, more kind of standard corporate contexts, looking at mission and vision. I did this especially in the context of a consultancy named SY Partners, and then a little bit also with the Nobel Collective. And in these contexts, in these official organizations, sometimes it's very tempting to do things that are tame, or do things that are very kind of low risk. And challenging the kind of organizational dynamics, I think, should only be done for good purpose, because of the risk and uncertainty involved. And what I want to say is that when it really matters, have the courage to try, even if the thing that seems necessary to try also seems impossible. So my example for this is a project that I worked on in the context of SY Partners. And it was for Starbucks. The experience happened May 29th in 2018. And the precipitating incident was that at a Starbucks in Philadelphia, two Black gentlemen had the police called on them and were arrested because they were in the store and hadn't yet purchased anything. This caused a huge national outcry. The political climate in the US then was very different than it was now. And so issues of racial justice and equity were really important, and really high profile issues. So the fact that this happened at a Starbucks, which claims to offer a third place for people to congregate. So your first place is your home, your second place is your work, and then everywhere else you can kind of be with the public and be with people in community. That's third place. And Starbucks really prided itself on being a third place. And so the fact that these gentlemen were arrested for being in a third place was really antithetical to Starbucks' mission and ethos. And so what we were tasked with doing was creating a learning experience, very much so a learning experience, to kind of understand the nature of bias and community and understanding. And the big risk, there were many risks that Starbucks took in doing this. But one of the big risks is that this experience, it was like 5 hours of curriculum that, again, we designed as thoughtfully as possible to be experienced by every single partner that works in a Starbucks store in the United States. They ended up also doing this in a few other countries too. That is a lot of people. Again, you can see some of the stats on the screen. Over 100,000 people participated in this experience simultaneously on the same day. And if you think about how diverse the US is, we had to create an experience that would feel appropriate and relevant for every possible mix of identities and dispositions, political persuasions, racial backgrounds, genders that you could possibly imagine, given how broad Starbucks' presence is in the United States. And the idea of actually confronting the kinds of bias and discrimination that resulted in those men getting arrested, the prospect of really addressing that effectively, even within 5 hours, felt quite impossible. And yet it was so important to try. Starbucks actually closed all the stores during working hours. They weren't going to expect their partners to take time outside of their regular working hours to do this. They wanted it to be an on-the-job activity. And so they closed every single store for this to happen, during regular working hours. Also a huge risk to their business. And yet it was a profound, not just statement, but act and commitment and attempt to live by their values in a way that was relevant and appropriate for every single employee. A lot went into this design, as with the other projects. I could talk about it for quite a bit longer. But if I'm going to offer you all a suggestion, again, thinking about what it means to have a learning culture within organizations, think about what it means to be together, what it means to have values and aspirations that may challenge the norm of the wider society, and have the courage to try when it comes to creating learning experiences that are actually going to deliver on that vision. That's what I think Starbucks really did in this case, and accomplished quite a bit of good in the process. One last lesson. I don't have a specific project for this, but it kind of came up in the course of discussing my contribution to your day here together and thinking about general ethos for design. And something that I see very often when it comes to experience design is that I really encourage people to design for and not against. It's very simple and useful to kind of catch yourself in it. Oftentimes when we're dealing with design for people, for living, breathing people and groups, where like you cannot fully anticipate what people are going to do, and also controlling the outcomes kind of neuters the experience. It takes the life out of it. It's easy to imagine all the things that could go wrong, or all the things that might go off the rails a little bit. And those fears can become a real fixation. If you're not really cognizant of what you're designing for, what exactly you want to result from this experience, it can be very easy to try and design against all of those negative imaginaries that you have. And so whenever you find yourself doing that, of like, oh, we don't want them to feel uncomfortable, we don't want this to take too long, all those things that you don't want to have happen, take a step back, and instead of designing for those things that you don't want to have happen, designing against them, reground on what you are designing for. That lesson can be relevant to almost any shape of experience that you are creating. So I encourage any of you to be in touch. I'm happy to answer. I think we're going to kind of go to Q&A a little bit here. As was mentioned in the intro, I do have a bunch of research and materials online that you can find where I did that comparative analysis of sex parties, funerals, and wilderness trips. So there's even more lessons and inspiration there. And it's really an honor to be opening your day here. And I'll turn it back over to you all. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say.
Thank you so much, Shaira. Thank you so much. First of all, I'm going to speak in Portuguese about a translation thing in Zoom. So just a second. Pessoal que está na tradução, enquanto a gente conversa aqui e aparece, vocês não conseguiam, vocês estavam escutando direto a tradução em português, então a gente vai ajustar aqui para que na próxima palestra em inglês vocês já possam também escolher escutar em inglês direto, original, né? Então a gente está mexendo aqui, tentando fazer isso. Ira, so first of all, I think we have here in the audience, we have many people from that construct the conferences, right? Corporate conferences. And the point is, sometimes it's really difficult to approve an idea, for example, with constraints, right? No. Everything has to be absolutely under control and absolutely. So my first question would be, how can we approve or how can we talk and present an idea that maybe has some risks, but we know that that kind of risk is important to the event? I'm just going to translate it really fast here. Então, minha pergunta para quem está online é, puxa, a gente está aqui, né, um grupo que monta conferências e às vezes é muito difícil a gente aprovar uma ideia que tem alguns riscos e tem alguns constraints, né, algumas limitações, como ela falou. Então, como aprovar uma ideia dessa? So, do you have any tips for us how to approve an idea like this?
Yeah, again, I think that one of the most tricky things working in a corporate context or big organizational context is you have many people who get to like have a say and you know, approve or not approve something. So first, you know, make sure you're talking to the people who have the most at stake and the most authority over the experience that you're creating. This is kind of like basic consulting craft, but really in terms of the experience design, if you've done the collaborative work with your, you know, group ahead of time to identify what really is the purpose and the mission of this, and have through that process demonstrated a lot of understanding and empathy for like the culture and the constraints that are at play, if you're presenting the idea in the spirit of honoring all of that, it's going to be much easier to bring folks along on something that may feel or sound very different. So those are the requirements. I often talk about what is worthwhile risk. So risk in general could be good, could be bad, could be appropriate or not. What makes a risk worthwhile is that the potential outcomes from it are so appropriate for what that context or a group needs that it's worth confronting. And so again, it's about figuring out, are you talking to the right people with the highest level approvals and the most at stake in this experience? And have you contextualized your idea as meeting the needs and honoring the constraints? And then you can propose stuff that seems very unusual, but chances are will resonate. Now, does that mean you'll definitely get approval? Not necessarily, but I would always suggest that formula.
Perfect. Corrado, do you have any question for Ida?
Regarding one thing, Ida, is that repertoire is usually something that we struggle with because we are in HR working and we usually have the same ideas or the same inputs. Where to find different perspective so that we can have better ideas and create better experiences corporate-wise?
Yeah. I almost feel like I'm the worst person to answer that because I have a lot of trouble having normal ideas, as you might be able to tell from some of the work that I presented. So I almost want to kind of see if I can tease out that costume wig example to like have more concrete inspiration for this challenge of kind of operating in contexts where it might be a struggle to find those ideas. Now, you know, there's this really wonderful movie. It's called Daughters. It's a documentary that came out, I think, last year in the United States. I really encourage anybody who aspires to be excellent at experience design to watch this. And it's about a father-daughter dance that was organized inside of prisons in the US. And the woman who put this together doesn't call herself an experience designer, but the experience design is so phenomenal. Now, in that case, she was creating father-daughter dances for, you know, groups of young Black women. And for her, it was difficult awakening to realize that many of these young women that she was designing this experience for couldn't have their fathers come because they were in jail. And one of the girls was like, well, why don't we do the dance at the jail, at the prison? And that's an interesting instance of like the idea, again, coming from your participants. And so I don't know if it's about like having exciting or out of the box ideas. I think, again, it's a matter of like meeting the moment and really listening to the people who have a stake in this and giving them permission to like imagine a little bit and making it safe to like imagine what could be. And so sometimes I have experiences that from a presentation standpoint might not seem that spectacular, but they were so appropriate for the group that they had a phenomenal time anyway. And so again, it's a matter of like, how do you listen to your participants and your target audience and listen in a way where you're not like, give me ideas. What are my ideas? You're just noticing, what do they value? What lights them up? When are they like relaxed? When are they enthusiastic? And notice the elements of that and see how you can turn that up in a way that they feel full ownership over.
Perfect. I had another question here is, do you have any memory of what really worked out and what was totally fuck up in a corporate event or something? Do you have any memory of that?
You know, I do have a very specific project. I didn't present it here, but I've talked about it in other presentations, and this was in a corporate context. It was with a leadership team that we had done a bunch of work with at a big marketing agency, and the organization was facing some very dramatic structural changes that they were going to put into place. And what this resulted in was a lot of fear in all the leaders. And because the organizational culture had a lot of kind of like gossip, it was very personality run, this resulted in some like pretty gnarly behaviors among the leadership team that made it really hard to help them actually execute this organizational change. And so I helped design an experience where they were brought together and blindfolded as a mechanism for helping them kind of confess to their own bad leadership behaviors in a way where they were not individually implicated, but they could see that everybody in the room somehow was culpable to contributing to this unhealthy group dynamic. And that created a moment to kind of shift it. Now, I designed that experience with the particular needs of that leadership team in mind. It was wildly successful. And I was asked several times within SY Partners to discuss the experience and present it. And so people kind of knew about it and knew the design of it. And so another team was like, oh, we want to do the blindfold thing. We want to do the bad leadership behaviors experience. And they described to me what was going on with the group. Completely different client. I can't remember what they said, but I'm like, you shouldn't do this with this group. Like, it's not the right thing. It's not appropriate. Like, the tensions are different, and so you won't have the right kind of payoff. And they didn't listen to me. They ran it anyway, and it totally fell flat. And I was so I was disappointed with myself because I feel like when they came to me to brainstorm, I wish I had waited a little bit more in order to give them other ideas to like help it actually work or help them do something different. But I wish I remembered what exactly it was about this group dynamic where I'm like, this is not appropriate for them. I can see why you want to do this, but it's not appropriate. So this is an instance where like, just because you see something work in one context and has a lot of power and a lot of interests and like feels relevant, you still got to strip down like what's relevant, what's appropriate, what's going to resonate with the group. You can't to is what that group needs and that group experiences. It is so highly contextual.
Perfect. Ida, our time is over. So thank you so much. It was really nice to have your perspective. And I hope to see you again or here in Brazil next year, maybe, right? In personal.
I would love to. I've been to Sao Paulo a number of times and love it. So for me, it's heartbreaking to join you all remotely. And I hope you all have a wonderful time today.
Perfect. Thank you again. Thank you again, Ida. Bye-bye.